one of them in Florida, where Fox's Eben Brown joins us live.
Jack, Florida's outgoing Republican Governor Rick Scott will be Florida's next U.S. Senator, defeating incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson by about 0.8 of a percentage point. Scott is glad the campaign, which often grew nasty, is over.
At least the campaigns I've been involved in are divisive and they're tough. And they really are actually way too nasty. But you know what? We've done this for over 200 years. And after these campaigns, we come together.
Additionally, Republican Ron DeSantis, former congressman, wins the election to succeed Scott as governor. He beat Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum, the Democratic nominee backed by Bernie Sanders. Jack?
Thanks, Eben. Democrats also lose a Senate seat in Missouri. Fox's Jeff Manasso with that.
It was a heartfelt concession speech here in St. Louis for Claire McCaskill, the two-term Democratic senator, to supporters in a tough fight in one of the most watched Senate races in the nation, and a seat that turned red toward 38-year-old Republican Josh Hawley.
Thank you for believing in our future. Thank you for believing what we can yet achieve. Congratulations. This is your victory tonight. It's your victory. You've earned it.
Yes.
You've earned it.
In one of the most expensive Senate races in the nation. In St. Louis, Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Fox News Decision Desk now projects Maine's governor's mansion flips from red to blue. Democrat Attorney General Janet Mills defeating businessman Sean Moody to succeed Republican Governor Paul LePage. This is Fox News.
Enjoy a world-class breakfast in historic Talafofo at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Serving as both a military dispensary, recreation, and rehab center for pilots after the war, Jeff's Pirates Cove offers a taste of local history while you start your day with a delicious omelet or steak and eggs. If you're on a budget, pick up one of Jeff's $8 breakfasts, all served up with endless coffee. For reservations and information, call 789-COVE. That's 789-2683. Start your day at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Open daily at 8 a.m. in historic Ipan, Talafofo.
It's important to have claims process that works for you. At Guahan Insurance Services, we make things simple and convenient. Same door you walk in to purchase your insurance is the same door you open to file your claim. We can't pretend that the car insurance claims process is fun, but we can promise a hassle-free and speedy recovery without any runarounds. For your home, auto, and business insurance, visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center on Marine Corps Drive in Tamuning. Don't forget to like us on Facebook or give us a call at 475-1162 or text 929-SAVE. That's 929-7283.
Recapping our Fox News alert, President Trump has telephoned House Democrat leader Nancy Pelosi to congratulate her on the Democrats' wins in several congressional races, allowing the Democrats to retake control of the House in January. Republicans will maintain control of the U.S. Senate. Some Tuesday races are still too close to call, though, including the Georgia governor's race and Wisconsin's as well, where Governor Scott Walker is still maintaining a slim lead. Despite losing the House, the president tweeting Tuesday was a tremendous success. The Federal Reserve Board's policymaking committee beginning 2 days of meetings on the economy beginning Wednesday.
Basically, the Fed will be passing time when they meet this time around. During the meeting back in September, the central bank raised its benchmark interest rate by 1/4 point, and the Fed is expected to raise rates by another 1/4 point at its next meeting in December. This week, no rate hikes are on the menu. The committee usually meets on Tuesday and Wednesday, but this week's meeting is on Wednesday and Thursday, avoiding conflicts with Election Day. And this will be the last committee meeting that is not followed by a news conference. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has announced that next year he will hold a news conference after each of the Fed's 8 meetings, an increase from the current schedule of quarterly news conferences. Hillary Barsky, Fox News.
Reuters reports that Boeing will send warnings to all airlines that operate 737 MAX jetliners that possibly erroneous readings from a flight monitoring system could trigger the aircraft to dive unexpectedly. The warning reportedly based on preliminary information gathered from the investigation of the flight that crashed in Indonesia last week, killing all 189 people on board. Delta Airlines apologizing to Michigan resident Matthew Meehan and refunding his airfare for a flight last week. Only after he sat down did Meehan realize the service dog who'd flown in that seat on the previous flight had left a deposit behind. Delta says it was a full flight. Wasn't much else they could do. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959. Now you can start planning for the holidays by getting a personal Christmas loan from $1,000 up to $3,500. Family Finance has 3 convenient locations to serve you. Give them a call in Dededo, 633-4473, Hagåtña, 475-4545, and the Upper Tumon location on the 2nd floor of the Pacific Building at 647-5626. Get your Christmas loans today from Family Finance.
Call the experts at Guam Hearing Doctors if you're worried about your hearing. The evaluation is simple and painless.
The season of giving is here, and the stations of Choice Broadcasting want to give back. 93.3 The Point, Boss 104, Star 101, and Lux Guam present Charity of Choice. Each of our radio personalities have chosen a Guam charity that they would like to benefit.
And I chose Habitat for Humanity. Tune in daily to see how you can help.
Charity of Choice 2018 is brought to you by Choice Broadcasting Company, Lux Guam, American Water Tech, and the station that gives from the heart, 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
If you can dream uncommon design and unprecedented engineering, you define the 2018 Lexus. The boldly designed IS Sport Sedan's aggressive design stimulates the senses.
Advanced paddle shifting puts the exhilarating performance of the IS Sport Sedan at your fingertips. With deep, luxurious seating, the ES350 offers an ultimate level of comfort, while cutting-edge engineering delivers a thrilling drive.
Put yourself in a 2018 Lexus.
Now with special incentives.
At Atkins Kroll.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfast with endless coffee and a taste of history.
Konnichiwa! We'll be celebrating the 39th Japan Autumn Festival on Saturday, November 17th, 2 to 9 p.m. at the Governor Joseph Flores Beach Park or Ipao Park in Dumont. Parking will be available across Oka Payless with free shuttle service starting at 1:30 p.m. Advance tickets available now at the Japan Club of Guam office located on the first floor of PM Marine. Once again, the Japan Autumn Festival at Ipao Beach Park, November 17th from 2 to 9. Come, join us. For information, call 646-8066. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Bank of Guam, and the radio stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And let's hope that everybody who participated in yesterday's electoral exercise is fully aware of the language of the Second Amendment. If they aren't, then I will see it as my personal responsibility to acquaint them with that language. So we start out every day with the Second Amendment, and as you well know, I really didn't care much for the interpretation of the language of the amendment by Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia. I'm going to kind of give him a pass this time, I guess. May he rest in peace. I usually try to find some current information about what the courts or other people or whomever is doing with the Second Amendment. You Tall Tales buffs know that according to Heller versus District of Columbia and Walker, as you were McDonald versus Chicago, a person has an individual constitutional right to keep a firearm in his house for his personal protection. You also know that in the Ninth Circuit, in those states where the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has appellate jurisdiction, you also have a constitutional right to carry a firearm openly in town. Well, I got some bad news for you today dealing with concealed carry, because the Supreme Court doesn't seem to be too enthusiastic about concealed carry or anything else dealing with the Second Amendment for that matter. So I've got an article that I plucked out of the bearing arms section of Town Hall, and it says, it wasn't that long ago when I wrote here that one of my hopes was that the Supreme Court would be far more likely to hear gun cases now that Kavanaugh was on the bench. After all, the author of the decision, dubbed Heller II, would likely be a great ally for Second Amendment advocates, especially after the way the left ran him through the mud. Well, let's hope that it doesn't work that way. Let's hope that Supreme Court justices are not governed by ideas of spite and revenge. Unfortunately, my hopes were seriously misplaced. The author goes on to say the Supreme Court is refusing a new invitation to rule on gun rights, leaving in place California's restrictions on carrying concealed handguns in public. The justices on Monday rejected an appeal from Sacramento residents who argued that they were unfairly denied permits to be armed in public. The complaint argued that a prior Sacramento sheriff who was in charge of handgun permits arbitrarily rewarded friends. The sheriff in question has reportedly changed his policy, but there was still a serious issue at work if something like this could happen. The author goes on to say, I hope that the court would at very least smack down the capricious nature of these, quote, may issue permitting laws, but that would require them to hear the case. That's clearly not going to happen. So I'm going to stop here for a second because I know that Al is holding, and I put myself in his place. At least he doesn't have to listen to uproarious music on hold, but I don't care much for holding myself, so I'm going to put the Second Amendment on hold for a moment and see what Al would like to share with us this afternoon. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, I'd like to know about the election.
About the election. Okay. Well, it's over, Al, and Lulian Guerrero won.
Oh, she should just stick to the banking.
Yeah, and I have an item on my card. The first item on my card is winners versus losers. So I will not only go into who won. You got your radio on in the background, Al. You need to turn that off.
Oh, it's my boombox.
Yeah, you need to turn it off. Otherwise, I'm listening to myself talk. Not to say that I don't sometimes talk to myself.
Yeah.
Confession, maybe when I'm driving down here and I'm thinking about my show prep, I start mumbling to myself a little bit. But usually I do it when there's nobody else around. But anyhow, Al, when I get to that part of the card, I will not only talk about who won and who lost, but I'm going to dissect the results of the election, conduct a post-mortem examination, perhaps an autopsy. So if you're interested, you'll want to make sure you hang on, okay?
Because I'm just wondering if it's a fix,
You're what?
I'm just wondering if it's rigged up. Because, it doesn't look like it's... Anyway, we'll see. We'll find out what's going on.
Okay, well, stay tuned, Al. Thanks for calling.
Thank you. Mahalo.
Okay, so the author here says, I had hoped that the court would at least smack down the capricious nature of these may-issue permitting laws. Now, let me talk for a moment about a may-issue permitting law. And that's what we had here until I think it was Tony Atta that changed our law that said that there were a list of qualifications, and if a person presented an application to the chief of police reciting those qualifications, the chief of police may issue a concealed permit. Doesn't have to. And if he didn't, there wasn't any real way to force him. Our statute has now been changed so that it says if you meet the necessary requirements, one of which is a firearms training course, which I think is a good idea, then the chief has to issue you a concealed ID card, concealed carry ID card. Okay, well, going on and bringing you up to date here where the Supremes are with the Second Amendment, the court has refused every gun case since the McDonald decision in 2010, despite several cases where it seems clear that the laws in question crossed the line. A prime example was the court's refusal to hear a case involving Maryland's assault weapon ban. However, we can't force the court to take on cases. It's purely its prerogative to decide what it listens to and what it doesn't. Now, get out your law and order notebooks here. So, because we're going to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court how it does business. There are no more direct appeals to the Supreme Court. There was a time when a direct appeal would lie from a state Supreme Court to the U.S. Supreme Court. No more. In order to get before the U.S. Supreme Court, it is necessary to file a petition for writ of certiorari. And if 4 justices sign off on your petition, then a writ of certiorari is issued and the case goes on the Supreme Court's docket. Now, a little bit behind the scenes on how that actually works. You'd think, well, there are 8,000 petitions filed every year. The court grants maybe 80 of them. So there's kind of a random selection basis there. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. According to some of the commentators, some justices will have it in their mind that they'd really like to deal with something. And so when the cert pool, which is made up of all the law clerks and has been since the 1970s, except for Justice Neil Gorsuch, who does his own, justices would tell their law clerks, be on the lookout for a case that raises a particular issue, because if you can find one, I think I can get 3 other guys to go along with it, and it's something I want to deal with. A good example, although a little bit complicated, is that at once upon a time, up until 1938, if a case was tried in a federal court dealing with a diversity of citizenship, where a citizen from state A sued a citizen from state B, the case could be tried in federal court on a diversity of jurisdiction basis. And in that case, the procedural law would be governed by state law. And the substantive law would be, quote, federal common law. Well, in a case called Erie versus Tompkins Railroad, that was reversed. And the Supreme Court said, no more federal common law. If a case is tried in federal court, we'll use the federal rules of civil procedure, which, by the way, we just adopted a couple of months ago. So that flip-flop there doesn't mean much, I suppose, anymore. 1938, that's 80 years ago. But at the time, this was revolutionary for people in the practice of law, and it had to have been more than just a coincidence. A story is told about Mr. Justice Douglas, very liberal judge from, I think, Washington State. And his idea was he wanted law clerks to dig through those petitions and find the handwritten ones, because he took a certain amount of joy in granting petitions for cert that were drafted by the petitioner himself in his own handwriting. I guess this was Bill Douglas's tipping his hat to his populist instincts. Well, one of those cases that Douglas found and brought before the court was a case called Gideon versus Wainwright, which was an important part of the criminal justice revolution during Warren Court days. Gideon versus Wainwright held that anybody who went on trial for a felony had to have a lawyer, and if he couldn't afford a lawyer, the state would provide him one. So the sentence here, however, we can't force the court to take on cases, is exactly right, and it's not exactly a random process or a crapshoot. The court has a certain amount of control of what courses it wants to take, and probably even better, what courses it doesn't want to take. So going back to the article, that means that despite our most fervent desires, we can't make it, the Supreme Court, do a blasted thing. I can't imagine how the court could see something like this as anything other than unconstitutional. That's the Sacramento law, which says that if the sheriff feels like it, he can do it. If he doesn't, he really doesn't have to. You deny people their right to bear arms for no valid reason except that someone in power thinks, why not screw them over? That's the problem with these May issue laws. They lead to that thinking. And that's if they're not outright corrupt. Far too often where power for something like this is placed in the hands of a few, those few start to look at how to supplement their income, especially if people are eager to do anything to get that permit. And the author says, don't tell me it won't happen because it already has. Shall issue laws change that completely. They take that authority out of the hands of the few and declare that without a valid reason, as prescribed by law, there's no incentive for shenanigans. There's no opportunity for them either. This case offered a golden opportunity, at least in my attorney mind, for the court to smack down these May issue laws, or at least the kind of crap that led to the lawsuit in the first place. So the Knights, as you were, the Supreme Court hasn't done anything with the Second Amendment since 2010, the McDonald decision, and my favorite justice, Clarence Thomas, has written in an opinion that there seems to be a hostility towards the Second Amendment, or that the Second Amendment is held in a less favorable position than the other parts of the Bill of Rights. And this, what I just read, certainly goes along that certain line. So I suppose if we're counting noses and counting jerseys, now that there are 5 red jerseys on the Supreme Court compared to 4 blue jerseys, and it only takes 4 justices to grant a writ of certiorari, maybe we'll see some more Second Amendment cases coming before the court. Anyhow, that's the Second Amendment for today. And we are going to go into the election, and we're going to talk about winners and losers, talk about those who have reservations on the train for Palookaville. You remember Palookaville, right, Real Joe Cruz?
It's where they all go, sir.
Yeah. Palookaville. I could have been somebody. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. But let's see. Wilson got a fight in the garden. And where did I go? A one-way ticket to Palookaville. Yeah. From one of my favorite movies, On the Waterfront. So I think it's really appropriate today to think in terms of everybody, of course, is going to be concentrating on who won and how much, how good they're going to be and how much you like them and how you supported them and et cetera. But I think it's also necessary to tip our hats to those who ran for office and didn't make the cut. It takes a lot to run for public office. I can tell you from personal experience that it is a life-changing experience if you really put your heart and soul into it. And of course, if you win, you probably feel pretty good about it when it's over. If you don't, it's a tough one. And I think we need to take into consideration that in a democracy, those who will actually get out there and do it deserve a lot of credit, win, lose, or draw. So I'm going to go back to Teddy Roosevelt, not my favorite politician, but his man in the arena speech is very, very appropriate today. And here's what Teddy Roosevelt said way back in April of 1910 when he gave a speech in France. I think he gave it in English, even though he was in France. But he said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms and great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, and who at best knows in the end of the, and who at best in the end, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. So, Real Joe Cruz, let's give a hand to all of those folks who threw their hats in the ring and didn't wind up in the winner's circle going to the home stretch. Yeah, so it's what makes the process work. So Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena. Now we go from there to winners and losers. And, of course, you know, I could read the results to you and tell you who won and what the margin is, the margin that they won by. But I think our Tall Tales listeners expect more than a mere reportage when they tune into Tall Tales. And let's take a second to see who's here. Okay, Ismael Velez is here, of course.
Welcome back.
And Juanita Machi is here. And Lynn and Vince Borja Paulino are here. Jack Hattick. Jack Hattick is here. He's still suited up for the game today. Yesterday when we left him, he was at the plate with a 3-2 count. Brad Hewitt is locked and loaded as usual. And Brad says changing words shall and may in the law. That's kind of what happened, Brad, with our May issue statute. And let's see, Rico Blancafor, the Glock party done him in. And Ben Torres, always good to know that you're around, Ben. Rico Blancafor voted for you. You'll get it next time. Brad Hokanson, good day, Mr. Klitzkie. Well, good day, Mr. Hokanson. I'm glad to see that you're on board. Leslie San Nicholas, Jack Hattig, thank you very much. Rico, I'm proud to have earned your vote. Okay, and that goes back to Rico Blancafor saying you'll make it next time. Donna Mila Titano, good afternoon. Ted Lewis, all the way from the mainland USA. Hello, Ted Lewis. Jack Hattick said, it absolutely is life-changing, but I'm proud to have tried. Working class forever. Okay, Simon says, that's a clever line, isn't it? Have you ever heard that before?
Yes, he used to play that game all the time.
Simon says. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, all right. Simon says, and Simon does say thumbs up. Thank you for reading the Roosevelt reading. As you know, democracy needs effort and not just words. True enough. And, you know, I just caught myself making an error when I saw Ismael Velez's name here. I better go back to the card. My bad. I forgot about the card. So we'll take a short break. I'll gather my thoughts, refresh my recollection, look at the script again, and then we'll do Zemi and Kotny.
I'm John Gibson. This is My Word.
As you've seen in the news, it is now an arduous and agonizing process to win admission to the United States as an immigrant. It's worth keeping in mind what it was like in the early 1900s when millions of people immigrated to the U.S., mostly from Europe. They arrived in New York Harbor, several thousand at a time on a single ship. Government agents boarded at anchor off Staten Island and gave the immigrants a cursory inspection for obvious disease. Those that passed, and it was most people by far, then disembarked on Ellis Island. Documentation was a piece of paper created where they boarded in Europe, handwritten, had name, age, destination, country of origin. That's it. On Ellis Island, another round of health inspections, but with such a crush of immigrants, not thorough at all. Rarely a person was held, maybe overnight. The authorities were looking to weed out people with infectious disease or who were suspected of being anarchists or men suspected of being imported to break strikes. Other than that, nothing. It was a paperless era. Documentation was almost entirely verbal, an immigrant speaking to an immigration official. No passports, no such thing as a visa or work permit. After 3 to 5 hours, they were on their way. 10,000 a day entered the U.S. this way. Looking back, we see those were the definition of back in the day. Now, nothing even close. I'm John Gibson. That's my word.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
Sanford Technology Group.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So the Daily News editorial where I'm going to start, I think, was inspired by Ismail's post on Tall Tales yesterday, which I fumbled and lost track of, but my recollection is that Ismail recommended something like what the Daily News is championing. And here's the Daily News editorial. Story of USS Oklahoma sailor Ignacio Camacho Fatfan reminds us of sacrifice. On Thursday, Guam will lay to rest an island son who died 77 years ago on a Navy ship 3,800 miles away. His return home is an improbable story of science linking two islands that came under attack within hours of each other. It reminds us of the suffering and sacrifice made during World War II. Petty Officer First Class Ignacio Camacho Fatfan, a steward's mate from Hagatna, was killed in action on December 7, 1941, aboard the USS Oklahoma at Pearl Harbor. And then we've got a little bit of history. The ship was moored at Ford Island. It was torpedoed by Japanese aircraft. It capsized, sunk quickly. Fatfan was one of 429 sailors killed aboard the USS Oklahoma. It would take another 7 decades for the military to identify his remains and return them to the family. And then the editorial goes through a description of how Fatfan's remains were unidentified for a long time, up until 2015, and when the Defense Department POW-MIA accounting agency began re-examining remains for identification, and that's when Petty Officer Fatfan's remains were identified, and he was brought back to the island this week. So a little historical note. Before joining the Navy, Fatfan worked for Captain Henry B. Price Elementary School in Manila. Price Elementary still there. Fatfan was 19 when he enlisted in 1939. At 10 a.m. Thursday, he will be laid to rest with full military honors at the Guam Veteran Cemetery in Pidi. It's a touching story. And as I recall, yeah, he was one of 12, according to Ismail, he was one of 12 Chamorros who died at Pearl Harbor on that day. And Ismail, wasn't it you that recommended that what the Navy should do is posthumously promote Petty Officer First Class Fatfan to Chief Petty Officer? I think it was you. If not, whoever. If not, my bad. But I thought it was you. Anyhow, it's good to see that the Daily News has recognized the heroism and sacrifice of that sailor. Okay, moving on to the Post. And I don't know, going through this editorial is going to be kind of like when I see some movies on TV. I always watch Casablanca or From Here to Eternity and half dozen other movies, no matter how many times I've seen them, and even no matter that I even can almost memorize the plots, I still go through them again, and I can't quite figure out why I do it. But it's the same thing with this primary election thing, and that's what the Post is climbing on a soapbox for today. It says, by daylight this morning, the day after Guam's contentious general election, there might not be a clear winner just yet in the gubernatorial race. The top vote getter in the gubernatorial race can only be confident of victory if he or she has more than 50% of the votes, plus one extra vote. No, more than 50% is all you need. You don't need more than 50% of the votes plus one extra vote. You could say it needs 50% of the votes plus one extra vote, but if you say he or she is confident of victory if he or she has more than 50% of the votes plus one extra vote. I don't know where you'd put that extra vote. In a two-way gubernatorial race, this would not be as much of an issue as the three-way gubernatorial race we just saw. A strong write-in gubernatorial team that landed more votes in the primary election than the Republican gubernatorial nominee in the primary election has led certain political observers. Who would that be? Certain political observers to guess that it's likely that none of the three will meet the 50% plus one threshold, and a runoff election between the top two vote-getters would probably happen. Later today, we will know if the 2018 election season isn't over yet. The three-team gubernatorial race followed the Democratic Party's split between the supporters of the party's nominee in the gubernatorial race, Lou Leon Guerrero, the camp of Senator Frank Blas, Frank Uggan Jr., who lost to Leon Guerrero by fewer than 300 votes. The primary election should be eliminated. And we go on to the next page with no transition here. The primary election should be eliminated because taxpayers who foot the tab of at least $400,000 aren't served by the elimination of just a few candidates and the possibility that a second-place winner in the gubernatorial race will want to pursue a write-in for governor in the general election anyway. If the Democrat and Republican parties still insist on having their own primary election, they should do it without mobilizing the government's personnel and without taxpayers having to write the check. It's a pretty simple concept for the government of Guam to do less and spend less, especially in an exercise that serves to promote only the party's political interests. Well, I just got to stop and take issue with this and kind of go through the same thing again. I'm not a progressive. I'm a conservative. But the party primary is a product of the progressive movement in the United States around the turn of the last century. Partisan primary elections, the direct election of senators, initiative, referendum, and recall were all progressive party platform planks. How'd you like that, real Joe Cruz?
It was
all
very tricky,
progressive
sir.
party platform planks. Yeah, a little alliteration there. And the thinking was that before we had partisan primary elections, voters would complain, yeah, we get to go to the general election and we get to vote and we get to pick from amongst the people that the political bosses say are satisfactory for us to vote for. Because rather than having parties, as you were primaries, there were party conventions. And that's where the term the smoke-filled room came from. In other words, a group of old men and smoking cigars in a smoke-filled room would do their horse trading and decide who would get to be elected to which particular office. And after the smoke-filled room adjourned, those people's names would be advanced to the general election. And Joe Q. citizen voter really has no choice but to vote from a pre-selected list. So the partisan primary was seen to be the remedy, the anti-smoke-filled room device. And that's why we have partisan primary elections today. So if the government doesn't run a partisan primary, there won't be any. There isn't a mechanism where you can say, well, we'll have the primary, but the party's got to pay for it. We'll invoice them, and they got to pay for it. Doesn't work that way. So each party, or all of the parties, depending on how many they are, would be up to them to decide how they would choose their own slates of candidates, and those candidates would then go on the primary ballot. You younger folks wouldn't remember this, but we didn't have primaries before 1970. Before 1970, we had the parties had conventions, and it was pretty much like I described it. It was decided at the convention who would get to run on that party's ticket, and of course, there wasn't much room for independent thinking or folks who would not toe the line, or folks who hadn't signed up or couldn't be depended upon to conform with the party's discipline. So that's the way it worked then, and that's the way it would work now if we didn't have partisan primary elections. Each party would choose its own candidates. And I would have to say, if that system had been in place in 2002, I don't think I'd have been in the legislature, because I'm too much of a nonconformist for the Republican Party to say, yeah, let's put that guy on the ticket. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm more conforming than I think. But that's the genesis of partisan primary elections. So if we don't have partisan primary elections, then what will we have? And my suggestion is that if we don't, we'll have the smoke-filled room and a small handful of people who probably don't smoke cigars anymore, because the tobacco police would ruthlessly sort them out. But a small handful of party bosses would determine who each party's candidate would be, and then we would go to the polls to choose from among the anointed ones. So that's my take on partisan elections. So today I'm going to give the blue star to the Post, because I don't agree with it. It helps a lot if you say something, if the editorial deals with something I like. but it's not fatal to deal with something I don't like if you raise an important issue. So the blue star goes to the Daily News. However, in light of the posts, as you were in light of the Daily News is paying close attention to what we do here on Tall Tales, I'm going to give the the Daily News the I Award. The I, yeah, we've never done that before. The I stands for Ishmael, and I just found out today that Ishmael is the Hebrew way of saying God is listening. So I can listen too. I don't equate myself with Ishmael, but I'm going to listen to, let's see who I've got on the line here. I got Mark on the line. Hello, Mark.
Hey, afternoon, Senator.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily maybe agree because I'm going to ask you a question about the primary.
Sure.
How can you say it's a partisan primary when it's an open primary?
Well, it's
anybody can walk in and say, or in fact, they get a ballot or a piece of paper with one side is the ballot for the Democrats, the other side is the side for the Republicans, told to not cross over. How is that a partisan primary when anybody can be whatever they want to be on that particular primary?
Well, here's how I can say that, Mark, okay? I can say it because it is the device that is used to advance people to the general election under a partisan banner. Now, there are more than one kinds of primary. There are open primaries, there are blanket primaries, and there are closed primary. There's a lot to be said for the closed primary because the open primary, such as we have, encourages rating, which is kind of coercive against not only the democratic process, but even the partisanship of parties. But it is a partisan primary. That's how I can say it, Mark.
Well, I guess it is by the label, but you just said it. It's open. So, and I guess I go back to this last one we had. You're telling me there was only 3,000 Republicans on the island of Guam?
Well, as I said, the flaw in open primary as ours is that it encourages rating, and the rating is coercive not only to the democratic process but even to the partisan aspects of election. So if we wanted to change our primary, perhaps we could go to a closed primary. And I have a feeling that probably the Republicans would object to that because conventional wisdom is that there are more Democrats than there are Republicans. I don't know that that's exactly true. And then the second problem is that politicians who appear to be restricting someone's absolute freedom to do whatever he wants to do at the polls are running a certain risk.
Oh, I understand and I agree. But to me, the way the primaries are run now, are you a member of any fraternal organization on Guam?
Fraternal organization?
Yeah, you know, like Chamber of Commerce, this, that, or the other.
No, not anymore. I am a citizen of Tall Tales Nation. That's about it, Mark.
Okay. Well, if say you're a member of the Chamber of Commerce and they're getting ready to have an election, shouldn't I? And I'm not a member. Shouldn't I be allowed to go in and vote because I'm on Guam and it's Guam Chamber of Commerce, regardless of whether I'm a member or not? That's my problem about the primaries is there's nothing that decides who's a member or not. And, okay, so it's a closed primary and there's fewer Republicans. That's the way it should be. It's just, to me, there's just too much freedom on the primary to allow anybody to be whatever they want to be on that particular primary. And it's not about the open election. It's about the party. Yeah, I understand the smoke-filled rooms, that if we could maybe get away from that and maybe have a true primary that is not run by the government. And I remember the last presidential election, they did something down at the Agana Shopping Center. Why couldn't we do that again for our Guam election?
Okay, Mark, you got to slow down here. I like to answer my questions seriatim, okay?
Okay.
I don't remember ever having a primary at the Agana Shopping Center. Perhaps...
I won't say a primary, Senator, but I remember before the last presidential election, the Democrats had something going on down at the Agana Shopping Center where we were allowed to, I guess, cast a straw vote for who we wanted to go to the Democratic convention and the delegates and so on. And delegates would pledge, to either...
Well, it was a party election.
Yes.
For the party officers. Well, the parties choose their officers in any manner that they see fit. Hey, Mark, I'm hearing Dave Brubeck's Take 5 in the background, so I'm going to have to let you go.
Okay,
but
no problem.
Thanks for raising that question.
We're surrounded by sound. There are sounds that you need to hear. There are sounds that you want to hear. And there are sounds that you long to hear.
I love you.
Hear it all, louder and clearer than ever before. If you or someone you know has a hard time hearing, Guam Hearing Doctors can help, using state-of-the-art test gear to evaluate your hearing and coming up with a plan to make your life better by making your hearing better. Call Guam Hearing Doctors for an appointment or visit them on the web at guamhearingdoctors.com.
My favorite piano player can do a really good job with the entertainer from the movie The Sting, which is what we just played instead of Dave Brubeck's Take 5. Need a little more discipline back there in the control room, real Joe Cruz. So anyhow, on the subject of primaries, yeah, I would rather, if I could choose, I would rather see a closed primary. And some states, you have to be on the rolls of a political party as long as a couple of months before the primary, before you get a ballot at the primary election. But like everything else that happens in politics, it takes the political will and perhaps the desires of the community to make things happen. And I think that it would be a tall order to do away with the primary election and a tall order to go from where we are to a closed primary. Another option that some of the states have is that the party functions like a runoff, like we did with the Attorney General. As many people as sign up to run for Attorney General go on the primary ballot, and only the top two advance to the general. So the primary also performs what I would call a sorting out function. If all it took was filling out a few pieces of paper and 250 signatures on a petition, you could conceivably have 100 people running for the legislature. Maybe that would be good, maybe not. But I think once again, there are upsides and downsides that we do with all of these things. I like to look at the elective process in such a manner that we minimize the advantage of incumbency. So if we had a ballot with 100 people on it, that would be a tremendous advantage for incumbents, because the incumbents get so much free name ID. But enough of that. I have awarded my stars. I awarded the eye to the Daily News in recognition of their recognizing the post that Ismail put up. And I've got a message here from Real Joe Cruz's favorite caller. I hope he calls again, you know.
Who, Zemi?
No, Tom Poole.
Oh, Tom.
Yeah. Tom Poole says, Judge, I would like to make a personal appeal to Jack Haddock to please run again. I thought he was the most impressive candidate, and more significantly, so did rock-ribbed Republican Dr. Larry Kasperbauer, who henceforth will be known on this station as Rocky Kasperbauer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, Jack, you made some good impressions, and I also would want to recognize your talents as a baseball player. You've lent your name to the Tall Tales conversation, so na usa fino tomorrow usa I palabran hatik para baseball, nai. And I can remember some of the plays that you were involved in. So sometimes the first time is not a charm. It took Jesse Lujan 3 trips to the plate before he finally got on base. It took Chris Duenas 3 trips to the plate before he finally got on base. So give it a try next time, maybe, huh? And then back to Ishmael has a post here, Ishmael Velez. Bob, on the Ignacio issue, I will go a step further. He and the other 11 who died in Pearl Harbor paid the ultimate price and served in the naval service of our country that they weren't even citizens of. Would be great for the 12 to be honored with a citizenship ceremony. Oh, that's touching, Ishmael. Yeah, let's. That would be something for Mike San Nicolas to do it. There is a device in the U.S. Congress called the private bill that can deal with immigration and citizenship matters. And I don't know if this is possible, but even if all Michael did was introduce a bill to grant citizenship posthumously to those 12, it would be a very nice gesture. Good thinking, Ishmael. Thank you very much for that thought. So Jack says, thank you, Dr. Tom Poole, for your appeal. I will most earnestly consider running again. I am humbled by your support, sir. So, some interesting thought processes going on here. It's a long time until the next election, and there are some things that you could do between now and then, Jack, that would kind of help you lay the threshold for a successful campaign the next time around. Maybe you might want to think about that. Okay, so we're coming right up on that big, exciting halftime show that we have every day at 5 o'clock on Tall Tales. And then I'm going to get back into winners and losers and see who has a ticket for Palookaville and go into the rest of the card, although it may take us all of the second half to finish with winners and losers. We'll just have to see kind of how it goes. If you happen to have the list of that any of the papers published showing who the top 15 were, I guess everybody knows who won the gubernatorial race, although Ray Tenorio is apparently still holding out for a miracle, thinking that when the absentee and other votes are counted, there may be enough to go over to go over that majority +1 threshold that the Daily News talked about. So I'll see you after that big halftime show.
find is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
This is a Fox News alert. The voters have spoken. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. And they've put Democrats back in charge of the U.S. House of Representatives. Democrats at a celebration in Washington, D.C., chanting for Nancy Pelosi, who could retake the gavel as the Speaker of the House in January. Democrats win more seats than needed to take back a House majority.
And almost all congratulations to those dynamic, diverse, and credible candidates who have taken back the House for the American people. Let us salute all of our candidates.
The change in power will impact the president's legislative agenda.
The president's going to have a problem getting through some of his big-ticket agenda items, tax cuts, immigration reform, that sort of thing. He might be able to work with Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats on things like drug prices and infrastructure, but his grand campaign agenda ideas are probably not going to go anywhere for the next couple of years.
Fox's John Roberts at the White House. The Republicans will keep control of the U.S. Senate. Among the new Republican senators, Florida's Governor Rick Scott, who unseats Democrat Senator Bill Nelson.
I'm going to look to the future, and we have a bright future in front of us.
And Missouri's Attorney General Josh Hawley.
The good Lord and the people of Missouri have given us the victory. We won.
He will replace Democrat Senator Claire McCaskill. A number of firsts in the 2018 midterms.
Colorado selected the very first openly gay man to serve as governor, Democrat Jared Polis. Tennessee gets its first female U.S. Senator and Republican Marsha Blackburn. The youngest person ever elected to Congress is Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at the tender age of just 29. And in Illinois, we're about to see the richest governor ever in American history, Democrat J.B. Pritzker, worth an estimated $3.2 billion.
Fox's Jill Nato. This is Fox News.
Enjoy a world-class breakfast in historic Talofofo at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Serving as both a military dispensary, recreation, and rehab center for pilots after the war, Jeff's Pirates Cove offers a taste of local history while you start your day with a delicious omelet or steak and eggs. If you're on a budget, pick up one of Jeff's $8 breakfasts, all served up with endless coffee. For reservations and information, call 789-COVE. That's 789-2683. Start your day at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Open daily at 8 a.m. in historic Ipan Talofofo.
Democrats have taken back some of the governor's seats with wins on Tuesday.
In Maine, Democratic Attorney General Janet Mills defeats Republican businessman Sean Moody to succeed term-limited Republican Governor Paul LePage, flipping the Maine governor's mansion from red to blue. Illinois voters chose billionaire J.B. Pritzker over incumbent Republican Governor Bruce Rauner. In Kansas, Democratic State Senator Laura Kelly beat GOP Secretary of State Chris Kobach. Republicans held on to one of the big races in Florida, where former Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis won over Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum.
He was a very formidable opponent, and I wish him well in his future endeavors.
GOP candidates for governor also came out on top in Ohio and Arizona. In New York, Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
Still too close to call the governor's race in Georgia, where Democrat Stacey Abrams implies that a runoff election is likely, telling supporters a few moments ago that Georgia voters will get a do-over. Also, no winner projected yet in Alaska's governor's race. A Colorado man has admitted he killed his family over the summer.
Christopher Watts admitted to killing his pregnant wife and 2 daughters as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. Watts initially told police he strangled Shannon Watts in a rage when he discovered that she killed their 2 daughters after he sought a separation. Prosecutor Michael Rourke saying he took the death penalty off the table after the victim's family agreed to the deal.
That, to me, was the most important consideration in deciding how to proceed with this case.
Shannon Watts' body was found in a shallow grave. The 2 daughters found submerged in an oil tank. Investigators determined Watts was actively having an affair with a coworker. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
Wall Street up on Election Day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gaining 173 points. NASDAQ added 47. The S&P 500 closed 17 points higher. Dow futures are trading more than 20 points higher. Asian stocks are generally trading lower. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
There's a reason every day a Guam homeowner is getting a solar system installed by Micronesia Renewable Energy. It's because MRE is the most trusted name in solar. With more solar energy solutions than any other solar company on island, homeowners have a choice to go solar for zero money down or take the path to ownership. Whichever way, it keeps our skies blue and your pockets green. And with the most experienced solar technicians and an energy production guarantee, there are no worries. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Life is too short to be isolated from the people you love. Hearing loss is the invisible disability. The experts at Guam Hearing Doctors have solutions.
The season of giving is here, and the stations of Choice Broadcasting want to give back. 93.3 The Point, Boss 104, Star 101, and Lux Guam present Charity of Choice. Each of our radio personalities have chosen a Guam charity that they would like to benefit.
And I chose Habitat for Humanity. Tune in daily to see how you can help.
Charity of Choice 2018 is brought to you by Choice Broadcasting Company, Lux Guam, American Water Tech, and the station that gives from the heart, 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
Konnichiwa! We'll be celebrating the 39th Japan Autumn Festival on Saturday, November 17th, 2 to 9 p.m. at the Governor Joseph Flores Beach Park or EPOW Park in Tumon. Parking will be available across Oka Payless with free shuttle service starting at 1:30 p.m. Advance tickets available now at the Japan Club of Guam office located on the first floor of PM Marine. Once again, the Japan Autumn Festival at EPOW Beach Park, November 17th from 2 to 9. Come join us. For information, call 646-8066. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Bank of Guam, and the radio stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfast with endless coffee and a taste of history.
Super Typhoon U2 spared us here on Guam, but the same cannot be said for our neighboring islands. From now till November 16th, join us as we help Saipan and Tinian to get back on their feet. Acceptable donations include batteries, flashlights, tools, cleaning supplies, mosquito coils, rope, toiletries, personal hygiene items, and others. Donations can be dropped off to all GTA stores, the Guam Daily Post, all Guam Fire Department stations, and the Santa Teresita Catholic Church. For more information on how you can help, visit postguam.com.
Another great halftime show here on Tall Tales. Shelley, I'm really glad you made it for the halftime show, and I noticed that that Ishmael has cooked up a punishment for your late arrival. So I can understand that. However, by the powers vested in me as the host of Tall Tales, it's okay, Shelley. I'm going to commute your sentence, Shelley. Yeah, you won't be deported. I'm going to commute your sentence, and the only thing that you'll have to do is try to figure out some kind words about the host of Tall Tales to post on Facebook here. I don't know, maybe you would rather petition me to not commute your sentence. But anyhow, I'm glad to have you on board. I noticed Lady D is also on board. Glad to have you on board, Lady D. And Kaz Endo says, it looks like the right end hurt Bota team more than Lou and Josh. Instead of fracturing Democrat support of their party's primary winner, it seems to have emboldened them, voters, to come out and support Lou and Josh even more, even if we were to assume that half of the write-in votes went to Bota. Had there been no such write-in campaign, Bota still would not have had enough to beat Blue and Josh in a straight vote count. I think the people of Guam wanted to make sweeping change after a decade, after a decade of Republican control of Adelup. 'Tis the way of the U.S. government works. It prevents men, or in this case a party, from having absolute power. The American voting system always finds ways to humble politicians. Okay, well, good point. I'm going to kind of incorporate that into my wrap-up here of winners and losers. But before I do that, I think I'm going to get a report from the man who's been in the arena for quite some time, the arena being the Guam Election Commission, right, Ken?
Yes.
So what's the latest from the Guam Election Commission, Ken?
Well, basically, it's moot now at this point, but this goes back to the concern I raised on Monday about that false flag operation where where someone was flooding the internet with wrong instructions on how to do the write-in that would actually invalidate their ballot. And I had talked with Maria on the phone, and she told me that my concerns would be addressed at the commission meeting at 8 o'clock. And, I was there Sunday when they announced the next commission meeting, and so I just wasn't sure if it was 7 or 8. That's why I called her, and she said 8 o'clock. So I went there at 8 o'clock, and when I got there, the police were instructed to remove me from the building. And I pointed out.
Okay, let's be precise here, Ken. So you went where?
I went to the UOG Field House where the commissioners, the Guam Election Commission meeting was being held at 8 o'clock on the 6th.
Okay, where was the meeting going to be held?
It was going to be held there in front of the tabulating machines. That's where the commissioners had their tables set up.
Okay, so you advanced towards the tables, is that correct?
Yeah, I went up there and sat down at one of the tables and did an interview with PNC, and then one of the police officers came up and requested that I leave the building, and I said, I'm here at the request of Maria Pangilinan. And he said, well, they've asked us to have you leave the building. They've asked us to escort you out of the building. And I said, she was the one that told me to come here. And so they sent a sergeant over to talk to Maria, and he came back with the message that the meeting had been closed. It was going to be
okay, now let's stop there for a second. The meeting had been closed?
Yeah.
That
was the word that came back to me, and I was kind of surprised because when we were there Sunday, there was no mention that it was going to be a closed meeting. There was going to be a meeting at that they were going to address the remaining items on the agenda prior to starting ballot counting.
Okay, so you went to a meeting before that was like recessed or adjourned to the meeting that took place last night. Is that correct?
The meeting Sunday was adjourned with their regularly scheduled meeting to take place the following Monday at 8 o'clock.
Okay, so what happened last night then? Was it a regularly scheduled meeting?
That was the regularly scheduled meeting, but when I attended, they basically told me that it.
I get that part, Ken. But I'm probing for some things here. Okay. So last night was a regularly scheduled meeting?
Yes.
Proper notice was published in the paper, etc.?
They asked that at the Sunday's meeting.
They what?
Has notice been filed, and whoever Maria's assistant was said yes. We published notice for the meeting.
For the Tuesday meeting.
The Tuesday meeting.
Okay.
And so that's why, it seemed perfectly normal to me, because it was the regular meeting of the Guam Election Commission, regular monthly meeting.
So when you were there, had the meeting been called to order?
Nope.
Were any of the commissioners there?
A couple, but they were all at the back talking with Maria and the consultant from the tabulating machine company. They were about 200 feet away.
Was anyone else there to cover the meeting? You mentioned
all the media. The KUAM was there. The Guam Post was there. Pacific News Center was there. But they're there at every meeting, so it wasn't unusual when I saw them all there. But if it was a closed meeting, why is the media sitting there at the table?
Well, were they able to stay for the meeting?
Yeah. They were there after I was escorted out of the building. The media was still there.
Okay, well, then I'm going to quibble with you a little bit on your statement that it's moot now, because from what you've told me, it sounds like you have an open government law violation.
No, that part is viable. My complaint that I was expecting the commissioners to address is moot.
Yeah.
And that was, the issue to make sure that any of these write-in ballots that were invalidated by the voter following the wrong instructions would be credited to the write-in column. That was the issue that...
I understand, Ken, but to me, what you're talking about here that I think is really important is what you are describing as a violation of the open government law.
Yeah, that is a concern that I have and something that I plan to pursue.
Okay. So was any explanation given to you by the police officer when he asked you, other than that the commission wanted you out of there?
Nope, no explanation other than the fact that he has been directed by the executive director of GEC to escort me from the building.
Wow. That's a little bit on the scary side.
It is to me too, because we've been working hard to try to get people more confident in working, interfacing with the government. We've been trying to get more people to come to board meetings, more people to go and testify to bills, because if you think back, there were days that it was either you or I, or only I, against 35 or 40 government officials testifying on various pieces of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen an increase in the numbers of people participating in the government process, and I would like to see those numbers continue to increase. But when something like this happens, because to me, if it had truly been a closed meeting, the media wouldn't have been allowed in there.
Well, the Election Commission can't have what you call a closed meeting, what the statute would refer to as an executive session, just because they want to. There are limited reasons that any board or commission can exclude the public from a public meeting.
That's what I thought, and I mean that was the feeling I had, especially after attending the Sunday reconvened meeting and my conversation earlier Monday with Maria Pangilinan.
Yeah, but you see what I'm driving at is that the way the statute is set up, you really shouldn't need to have an invitation to come to a public meeting. A public meeting means anybody can come in there. He doesn't need to have any reason whatsoever. Maybe he just wants to get in out of the rain. And unless every board and commission complies with that idea, then we don't have public meetings.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on that. This is something that we've been working hard as an organization to build public awareness of, because the whole idea of a board is they are the agents of the public that, you know, sit between the government agency and the public, and they're supposed to represent the public. When they act in the manner that they were acting, they're not representing the public. But we've, you know, as we've discussed over the past few months, GEC is more concerned about serving and supporting political parties than they are about the public.
Yeah, well, I've made the point more than once that if we want arbitrary and capricious decisions to be made, we don't need 7 people to do that. We could find one person to do that more than adequately. Well, Ken, yeah. I'm really shocked by what you've told us, and I have a feeling you're not the kind of guy to just let it rest. So keep us posted, okay?
I will. And thank you for the time, Bob.
Thanks for calling in. And I got Tim. Did you get kicked out of the Election Commission meeting too, or?
No. I'm calling about. I hope it's okay. I'm calling about something you're not talking about.
I will give you leave to talk to about something I'm not talking about. Go ahead.
Okay, and I don't know if you know, but they just completed a press conference up at the Chancery.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but Archdiocese is declaring bankruptcy, Chapter 11.
What I understand is that they will be declaring a Chapter 11 or filing a Chapter 11 bankruptcy in December or January. But go on.
Yeah, and I don't know how much you've heard about it already, but it was kind of curious because one of the reporters asked, well, you know, what happened with the mediation process? Because at the beginning, Archbishop Burns said that they were able to settle some of the claims. And so when the reporter asked, well, how many claims did you settle? The attorney that was speaking at that time said 2. So all that mediation, only 2 claims were settled. And I guess that's why we're now filing bankruptcy, because obviously mediation didn't work. Huh? What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
why it broke down?
Yeah, I don't have a good factual record to speak from, but I will speculate just a little bit. Okay.
Please.
It could be that Chapter 11 bankruptcy is the best route for everybody to proceed on. Most people don't understand the mechanics of it. The mechanics of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And what it amounts to is that a period opens in which people who have claims against the bankruptcy must file their claims. And the claims are sorted out. There are different kinds of claims, different kinds of secured creditors, unsecured creditors, etc. It's a pretty complicated mechanism. And that a trustee in bankruptcy takes over the finances of the bankrupt. And the trustee in bankruptcy is probably the most powerful animal known to the law. Trustee in bankruptcy can run around and void contracts and set aside settlements and has tremendous power. Trustee can't act without the approval of the court, but the idea is that the trustee gathers together all of the assets of the bankrupt, and then, according to various statutory formula, distributes the assets of the bankrupt on a periodic basis in such a manner that the bankrupt can continue as an ongoing business, thereby probably provide a better remedy to the creditors than if there weren't a bankruptcy and the creditors kind of chop the bankrupt up into small pieces. There's another angle, and that is sometimes the courts will allow for what's called a debtor in possession. So instead of appointing an outside trustee in bankruptcy, theoretically the bishop could be the debtor in possession and move the bankruptcy forward. So I don't, from what I know right now, which is not too much, I don't see this as a particularly onerous move either for the claimants or for the archdiocese.
I agree. Well, I don't know as much as you do about it, but this mediation thing just seemed to be a bunch of back and forth for a very long time. And bankruptcy seems to take it out of the back and forth and gives it to the courts, right, I guess, and somebody else, disinterested party, decides what's going to happen, right?
Well, I don't know if the bankruptcy proceedings would necessarily cancel out the mediation. It might put some benchmarks, excuse me, around the mediation. I don't know. I'm sure there's an answer, but I don't know.
Well, what do you think about the fact that only 2 claims were settled after how many meetings and how long and what back, all that? I mean, I'm curious as to why that number is only 2.
Well, it could, unless you know what the mechanics of the mediation are, and of course we don't, it could be that 90% of them were 95% settled, and it was just the remaining 5% that needed to be settled. I'm not in a position to speculate on why only 2 claims were dealt with in the mediation process.
Well, I happen to know one of the persons who settled, and maybe this will shed some light on it, but I won't say her name, of course, but she was basically molested for a period of about 10 years by her pastor, and they offered her $5,000. I don't know for sure if she took it or not, but that was the offer, $5,000. And so that could have been the reason why nobody wanted to settle. But who knows? It's going to be interesting to watch from here on. I'm actually looking forward to, resolution, and bankruptcy seems to be a much cleaner way to get this. And of course, that legislation, that window is always open. So the attorney addressed that as well, that there will be a fund that future claimants can make against the fund going forward. I did have one quick question, though, that we all know that, well, not we all know, but many of us know that the Archdiocese of Ganya is one of the biggest, what's the right word, creditor, debtor, to Bank of Guam.
Debtor.
Debtor, right.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest debtors, right. And to the tune of about $20 million, which is the figure I saw a couple of years ago. What happens in bankruptcy? Archdiocese owes Bank of Guam $20 million. So now what? What happens?
Well, it could very well be that the way the bankruptcy is structured, there would be the payments on the debt would continue through the bankruptcy.
Okay, I see. So that it's not just like they can still. Anyway, everything keeps going forward. They just don't lose the $20 million or whatever.
Well, again, without having more facts, but that's the general theory of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy is to let an ongoing business continue in business in such a manner as to perhaps not liquidate all of the debt, but a large portion of it. Whereas if it were a Chapter 7 straight bankruptcy, you gather all the assets together, sell them, and divide it amongst the creditors in accordance to their priorities, then it's over.
Right.
And very few people come out very well on a Chapter 7.
Right. Okay, well, just on the news there, and I figured you could educate us all, so appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, Tim. Thanks for calling.
Yep.
Okay, so Chapter 11 at the church, well, I'll be picking that up and giving it the usual thorough analysis that you're all accustomed to. I'll do that tomorrow. But right now it's time for the 7th inning stretch. So we take you now straight to the Center field bleachers at Wrigley Field. Jack Haddock at bat. 3-2 count.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
Sanford Technology Group.
This is where we left you yesterday. Haddock hit that towering foul ball down the right field line. It drifted off into the stands. The right fielder couldn't catch it. Now Jack's still at the plate. Count is 3-2. The windup, the pitch. Ooh, called strike 3. Wow. So he's out. He's walking off the field. I'm using their super microphone. He's saying something. Okay, I could pick him up with our super directional microphone. I heard him say, "Just wait till next year." That's Jack Haddock. Yeah, well, Jack says there were many times people were trying to get me to swing at a pitch in the dirt, but I always kept my eye on the ball this election. Okay, well, good game, Jack. You played a good, clean game, and the fans loved every minute of it. So, as you said, maybe next time. Okay, so back to the election here, and I start out with the finding that yesterday was a great day to be a Turlahi. So when it comes to winners and losers, if your name was Turlahi, you were a winner, because number 1 and number 15 were Turlahis. How often does that happen? It's probably too late to go out and start working on a petition to change your name for the next election. Well, I guess it's too early. So that's one of the winners. And another winner here is Peggy Denny. Now, what is Peggy Denny most noted for?
She's a reuse and recycling superhero on Guam.
Yeah, if Peggy were here in the studio, this is what she'd say: "I recycle, and so can you." Right? That's Peggy's punchline. So it looks like Peggy had a hand in the election results here, because Tina Munya Barnes is back, and Tello Taitigui is back, and Adolfo Palacios said one of the really late results was hanging on there at 15. He just dropped out at the end. So apparently the voters have been paying a lot of attention to Peggy Denny, and were recycling some of those people that had run before and lost. So your influence was felt there, Peggy Denny. That's one of the conclusions that that I draw. As far as losers are concerned, I think the GFT perhaps was one of the bigger losers because they are looking at a $5,000 fine for backing Mike San Nicolas. And Mike San Nicolas, where is that result? Yeah, Mike San Nicolas won by almost 4,000 votes. So was it worth the risk when Mike San Nicolas won so handily? Maybe not. Nesters were also losers. You'll recall that Kevin Kerrigan, who does the news on the Ray Gibson show, does a crackerjack job of doing the news on the Ray Gibson show, mentioned that during the time leading up to the election, some of the candidates found a nest on the government payroll. And I kind of picked up on that and adopted the term nesters. So the nesters didn't fare too well. Jermaine Alerta didn't make the cut. Ben Servino didn't make the cut. Julius Santos didn't make the cut. And Jose A. San Augustine didn't make the cut. So although it was good to be a Terlahi, as far as being a San Augustine, not so much. So the only nester that made it was Tello Taitigui, who was transferred to the governor's office as a special assistant just before the deadline, the filing deadline, so she could keep her government job and run for office. So the nesters didn't do so well here. Now, I'm going to count, as far as winners are concerned, in addition to Peggy Denny, I'm going to count Dennis Rodriguez as a winner because although he had his problems going into the primary, he seemed to have walked away from that relatively unscathed. And when Dennis lost the primary, my analysis was that Dennis had political potential. He's young, and he's got good political skills. He had some potential, but the key for Dennis is to try to figure out some way to remain relevant between now and the time. He's probably a pretty good double-A ball player right now. I don't think he can hit major league pitching. He needs to stay in the minors maybe for another 10 years, and he'll be ready. So he didn't endorse anybody. He was almost invisible after the primary, except for one item that popped up on the card here that I may not get to until tomorrow, and that's Dennis Rodriguez versus your money. But I don't want that to spoil my analysis right now. Some of the other another winner, pair of winners were, I think, Ken and Andre came out of this thing winners, because if you look at the results, they were the guys that prompted this write-in campaign for Frank Uggan. And I think at the time that it started, people were saying, oh, you know, this guy over here, where is he? Over here at his lazy boy, the smart money. I think it was heard to say, if you can get 2% of the votes cast, that'll be lucky. Write-in campaigns never go anywhere. Well, the write-in candidate got almost as many votes as the Republican nominee. And if you combine that with the mistake campaign in the last election where 7 incumbents lost their seats primarily because of their membership in the WANPAT 10, it shows that that those guys, although they're not kingmakers, certainly have an influence on the political process. Whether you like how they use their influence or where they take it is up to the individual, but certainly they do have a presence in the political process. So although they didn't win, and I haven't gone through their list of candidates to see how their list of candidates fared, it's fair to say that they came out of this winners as demonstrating that they do have some power when it comes to electoral politics. Let's go up and look at Lulian Guerrero. Now, Lulian Guerrero got the most votes, and she will be sworn in as governor in the first Monday in January. There's no getting around that. But if I put on my dung-colored glasses here, which allows, it's the opposite of rose-colored glasses. If I look at things in a light most unfavorable to Lulian Guerrero, this is what I found. She and her campaign spent $110 per vote. If you divided the amount of money that her campaign spent on that campaign and divided it by the number of votes they got, it comes out to a little over $110. Spending $110, she got 0.7% over the majority. 250 votes would have taken the matter into a recount. So although she beat the other two candidates quite handily, when it came to beating out the magic majority number, she just won by the skin of her teeth. So I'm probably going to keep this as part of my notes because what happens to people when they are elected to just about anything, there's a tendency for a degree of hubris to set in, and it might be a good idea for Lou to keep in mind that she does not have a strong mandate here when you consider how much money she spent and the small margin of victory. Frank Hogan, of course, lost the primary. He finished third in the general election. So I suppose you got to mention him as a loser. However, not as bad as Ray Tenorio. You know, when back last spring when we were talking about who was going to run and, doing all the prognostications, etc., and it appeared there'd be a real dogfight amongst the Democrats, which there was, and there's Ray Tenorio, an uncontested primary. So while all the Democrats were tearing each other to pieces, Ray Tenorio would have plenty of time to build a strong campaign and take advantage of the apparent disarray in the Democrat Party, and would have seemed to have had a really good chance to have won the election. But when it was all over, he got 9,419 votes, whereas the write-ins got 8,161 votes. So not a very good showing for someone who ran unopposed. I had a post here from R. Carl that I wanted to read if I can find it. Carl Nelson, as Bob said, the Republicans damaged their brand by not providing an alternative to out-of-control spending. Very few Democrats look more fiscally responsible than some Republicans. Why vote for pretend Democrats when you can vote for real Democrats? So Carl makes a good point. And one of the testimonies I turned in at the numerous tax increase bills that that Governor Calvo sent over was that I was going to have to change some of the templates in my nasty letter machine because I had a template that, talked about tax and spend Democrats, etc. So what I had to do, I had to change that from tax and spend Democrats to tax and spend Republicans, because that's the way the Republican Party appeared to me, and I don't think I was the only one. Constant attempts to raise taxes and not do a thing as far as the government of Guam was concerned, as far as making it run more economically. In fact, just the opposite. People were hired, etc. And I think that the Republican brand, that Governor Calvo and his lieutenant governor have so damaged the Republican brand, it's going to take a long time to rehabilitate it, a long, long time, and it's going to take some hard work in order to do it. Something like a return to Republican principles would probably help a little bit. Something else, going back to the baseball analogy, Ray Tenorio should have been recognized as the titular head of the Republicans going into the election, and there should have been coattails for Republican candidates to ride on, and of course there weren't. Ray Tenorio's coattails were about as long as a tail on one of my older T-shirts. So, Ray Tenorio did nothing for the Republican Party. Okay, I've got coming up on the home stretch. After the home stretch, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, and I've got our Carl on the line who wants to chime in, and that'll be it for today's exciting adventure of Tall Tales. Hang on.
The problem isn't just not being able to hear or understand, or having to tell people to speak louder. Sometimes the frustration is having to repeat yourself too many times, or speaking so loud you're almost shouting. At Guam Hearing Doctors, we understand that hearing problems affect both sides. One of our goals is to help your hearing for those around you. Call us at 989-TEST to learn more.
Going back to a sports analogy here again, another thing that hurt Ray Tenorio was the fact that the manager of his team left his pitchers in way, way too long. Pitchers being directors. Michael Bora, getting smacked out of the park all the time, and his director of mass transit, Rick Augustine, was no better at all. So, Carl, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick up a call from Domingo, and then I'm going to come back to you. Good afternoon, Domingo.
Half a day, Bob. How you doing, sir?
Fair to partly cloudy, Domingo.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, and you're doing a great job. I love listening to Tall Tales.
Thank you.
All right, just recently you mentioned about how the Republican Party would need to rebuild their brand.
Correct.
Right? And I was wondering, just what are your thoughts? Because in my humble opinion, I believe that Guam could probably use a third party, an independent party or a libertarian party, or I don't know, a third party, because like our current government system, we have a three checks and balance. We have the executive, legislative, and the judicial. So why not have a third party to possibly to keep the other two in check?
Well, I hear what you're saying. I think my preference would be for the Republicans to start acting like Republicans again, because I've been a Republican for a long time, and to start a third party, that has had very little success. It's been tried in the U.S., but it hasn't worked very well, Domingo.
Well, the way that I see that, Guam, we are a smaller population, and we have a lot of folks, that there are some Republicans who have Democratic type of ideas and values, and vice versa. We have Democratic candidates who have Republican conservative type of. So why not a third party where it kind of encompasses all of those values?
Well, I hear what you're saying. Pretty hard to start a third party under our system of law, because in order for a third party to get on the ballot, it had to have polled 10% of the votes cast in the previous election. And of course, if you're not on the ballot, how are you going to do that? You can't get there from here. But that's an interesting suggestion, Domingo. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, thanks for your insight, because I did not know about that 10% previous. But would a referendum possibly create a law to allow such a third party, a creation of a third party?
Referendum or initiative could do that, yeah.
Right. So again, that I'm just saying that if there's a lot of because I've talked to some folks, and some of these folks told me that they did not vote because they were not happy with the candidates that were before them. Then I said, hey, whether or not that you like the candidates or not, if you don't vote the way that I see it, you don't have the right to complain about our government.
Good point, Domingo.
All right, Bob. Continue with the great work, and have a great night.
Thanks for calling Tall Tales, Domingo. Nice talking to you. And here's our Carl at the end of the program. Hello, our Carl.
Hey, Bob. Yeah, it's a very interesting show as usual. Yeah, personally, I wouldn't be interested in a third party. Historically, they have never really done well. I think that the libertarians have been trying for decades to really get some good results, and so far they have not done well. And I really think there's two views of government, that are opposing each other. One is ever expanding government spending and control of our lives, and the other one is less. It's shrinking that and giving us more freedom, giving us more control of our own money we've earned. And I really don't see anything beside those two views. I think you were right on when you said all we need to do is have Republicans act like Republicans. And the last person I can remember doing that is you when you were in office. You ran a very inexpensive operation, and you could have kept running over and over, and people would have kept voting for you. I would have kept voting for you for sure, every time. So, yeah, I think the problem is not, in my opinion, is not having a third party. Although the party has damaged itself, I think for the right candidate or candidates that come out and really want to differentiate themselves, they can build their own brand, and they can build a reputation for being fiscally tight-fisted and conservative. So far, I haven't seen that. It's pretty much a lot of the candidates tend to look around and say, what's everybody else doing? And, well, me too. I'll do more of the same. And very little differentiation.
You see, in a perfect world, the leadership of the Republican Party would be going out and trying to find people that had that particular mindset and encourage them to run for election.
Yes, that would be a very, very good idea. Personally, I keep hoping for some miracle that we'd actually have we've moved to a what's called a part-time model of legislature. I prefer to call it a focus legislature because it forces the legislature to get down to business and focus on critical issues and not waste a lot of time on non-essentials.
Well, if we had a part-time legislature, how would we do all of the resolutions, perform all of the marriages, have all of the resolution presentation? I don't know if we could squeeze all of that into a part-time legislature, Carl. Hey, Carl, I got another caller holding here, and I'd kind of like to get him in before the end of the program, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for giving me a couple of moments. I appreciate it.
Glad you called, Carl. Hello, Kaz.
Half a day, Senator Bob.
Half a day.
Boy, what a ruckus election that was. It's quite fun to watch.
It was indeed.
So all this discussion of a third party got me motivated to call you, and I thought you and I should have founding credits for the next party. Let's call it the Super Bowl party.
The Super Bowl party.
Yeah.
How about the Bob and Kaz party? No, maybe Kaz and Bob party, huh?
Yeah, I think so. That would be great. You know, the early returns on the election sort of told the story. It was already 50%, I think, at the first hour. So, yeah, not too surprised actually. Once we saw the 50% to almost 80% lead in the first 3 hours, it was indicative of what was going to happen with at least the gubernatorial. I wanted to know what your thoughts were with the sort of the all new rookie team coming into the legislature, being a senator yourself. How does all the inexperience help or hurt us?
I'm not looking forward to it. I like a divided government better. I'd like to see the legislature from one party and the governor from the other party, even if that means that the Republicans don't have complete control. But here we've got the Republicans controlling both. For practical purposes, my sense is the Attorney General, and I don't see that as a good thing, especially with so many people who are inexperienced in what I would call the world of affairs, you know. Right. And then, you know, when you count it up, there are going to be 10 women in this new legislature and 5 men. Now, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to say, oh, but I'm not going to do that, you know. I'm not excited by the fact that there are going to be 10 women in the legislature and a female governor. I know that's politically horribly incorrect, but I would say this, Kaz, I have never voted for someone because he or she was a man or a woman, nor have I ever voted against someone because he or she was a man or a woman. But the tenor of the time suggests that I'm the one that's out of step and that I should be celebrating because men weren't able to get elected to the legislature. I'm not a fan of identity politics. I think we should measure people by the content of their character, etc. So I don't see much good coming out of the fact that 10 of the new senators are going to be females. I hope that when I get down to my car, I don't have 4 flat tires, but that's the way I see it, Kaz.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The inexperience also makes me ponder a little bit about what the results are going to be from policy judgments and policy decisions that are made next year. It'll be interesting to see, but hopefully the governor has the veto power, and she's an experienced person. Maybe she'll make the right calls. I think she will. All right, thank you.
Thanks a lot for calling, Kaz. So you wrapped up the program for me, Kaz. Let's see, we're about a minute and a half from the end of another beautiful day here at Tall Tales. I'll be back tomorrow, and I'll be talking a little bit more about winners and losers and continuing my autopsy of the election. And then we'll get into the card. I got some really interesting things on the card, too, like independent Guam versus the Navy, U.S. government versus the CLTC, Paul Pablo versus the legislature, Trump versus birthright citizenship. And then, of course, we'll have the results of the national elections tomorrow, and we'll talk about that a little bit, too. So I know you won't want to miss the exciting episode of Tall Tales, which will kick off at 4 p.m. tomorrow. So I'll see you then.